Just recently, my 16-year-old son told me that I was wrong about something. And not in the way that teenagers usually tell you you're wrong. He didn't roll his eyes, he didn't sigh, he didn't mutter something under his breath as he walked away. He actually sat across from me and he made an argument. He looked me in the eye and he laid out his reasoning and very clearly and respectfully showed me that he felt like I was handling something the wrong way. And inside of me, here's what happened. My first instinct, the one that rose over me before I had a chance to think, was to shut it down. I'm the parent. I've been doing this longer than he's been alive, and I don't need him telling me how the world works. But then a second thing happened. Maybe 3 seconds later, I realized he was right. Not completely, but mostly. He had thought about it, and he had organized his reasoning, and he wasn't being emotional. He wasn't being disrespectful. He was disagreeing with me, and he was doing it well. And in that moment, two things hit me at once. The first thing was pride, like genuine, deep pride. Because whatever else I've gotten wrong as a parent, and there's been plenty, something clearly worked if my son is capable of doing that. The second thing was a question. Did I teach him to do that, or did he learn to do that in spite of me? Because if I'm honest with myself, really honest, most of my parenting instincts point in the opposite direction, toward compliance, toward because I said so, or toward a model where the parent speaks and the child listens and the hierarchy is maintained. That's how I was raised. That's how most of us were raised. And it's producing a generation of adults who can follow instructions, but aren't always great at articulating why they disagree with one. That's why, when we come back, I'll be making the case for teaching your kids to disagree with you. Welcome back to The Case For. I'm your host, Matt Campobasso. Today's a solo episode about parenting, but I want to be upfront. It's also about leadership, about communication, and about a skill that I think is one of the most important things a human can develop. The ability to disagree with someone who has power over you, respectfully, with reasoning, and without burning that relationship to the ground. As an attorney, if there's one skill that has defined my professional life, it's the ability to make an argument, to take a position, support it with evidence, anticipate the objection, and end up presenting it in a way that's persuasive rather than aggressive. That skill puts food on my table, and it's what I do every single day. And yet, I have historically not taught that skill to the 3 people who need it the most, my kids. Instead, I've defaulted more often than I want to admit to a model that looks a lot more like a courtroom where I'm the judge and the jury and there's no opposing counsel. I make the ruling, they comply, case closed. But today I want to put that model on the witness stand because I think the instinct to train compliance in our children is one of the most well-intentioned but also damaging things that parents do. And I think the alternative, actively teaching your kids to disagree with you, isn't just better parenting. It's the single best preparation you can give your kids for the world they're eventually going to walk into. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's a difference between disrespect and disagreement. Most households have collapsed those two things into one. When a child pushes back on a parent's decision, the default interpretation is defiance. The child is being difficult. The child is challenging my authority. The child needs to learn their place. But what if the child is doing something far more sophisticated than that? What if they're testing a skill that every adult needs and almost nobody explicitly teaches? And that skill is saying, I see this differently, and here's why, and doing it to someone who holds power over them. I want you to think about situations where that skill matters. A boss makes a decision you disagree with. A doctor recommends treatment you have questions about. A partner wants to handle finances differently. Any system, a school, a company, a government, does something you believe is wrong. In every one of those situations, the person who can articulate their disagreement clearly and calmly and with evidence has an enormous advantage over the person who either stays silent or explodes. Where do you think that skill gets practiced first? It gets practiced at home, at the dinner table, in the car, in a conversation about bedtime or screen time, or why they can't go to their friend's house on a school night. Those aren't annoyances, they're opportunities. And every time we shut them down with, because I said so, we're not maintaining order, we're stealing a chance to show our kids a skill that they're going to use many times in their life. And now the evidence. Exhibit A, the compliance trap. Let me describe a parenting model I think most people will recognize. A parent makes a decision, a child's expected to follow it. If the child questions the decision, a parent interprets that as a challenge to their authority. The parent reasserts the decision, usually with more force. The child then either complies or escalates. If they comply, the parent feels validated. If they escalate, the parent feels disrespected. In neither scenario does the child's reasoning get heard. And this model works. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. It produces obedient children. It maintains household order. It's efficient. And for a 7-year-old who needs to brush their teeth before bed, it might be the right approach. And I'm not making the case that every parental decision needs to be a negotiation. But here's the trap. The model that works for brushing your teeth at 7 becomes the default for everything at 15. And at 15, your child is developing the cognitive ability to reason, to evaluate, to form genuine opinions about how the world works. And if the only tool they've been given is to comply or get in trouble, they're going to carry that tool into adulthood. They're going to sit in meetings and stay silent when they see a problem. They will accept a doctor's recommendation without asking questions. They will vote in the way that their social group votes because they think disagreeing is dangerous. They will stay in relationships where their voice doesn't matter because that's the dynamic they were trained in. The compliance trap is not about bad parenting. It's about a model that doesn't scale. What works at 7 breaks at 15 and cripples at 30. And the parents who run it, and I've been one of those parents, are not trying to silence their kids. They're trying to maintain a structure that feels safe and orderly, but that safety is an illusion. Because the child who never learns to disagree at home doesn't become an agreeable adult. They become a silent one. And silence in the face of something you believe is wrong is not peace. It's surrender. Exhibit B, disagreement as a life skill. I want to tell you what my job actually is. It's not to yell louder than the other side. It's not to intimidate or bully or overpower. My job involves taking a position, supporting it with evidence, anticipating a counter-argument, and then presenting my case in a way that is clear, organized, and persuasive. That's it. That's the whole profession. And I can tell you that the best lawyers I've worked with or gone up against share one quality. They can disagree with you in a way that makes you respect them more, not less. They don't attack your character. They don't raise their voice. They lay out their reasoning and they let it stand on its own merit. And when they're done, even if you disagree, you think that was a good argument. And that skill is not exclusive to lawyers. It is useful in every single arena of adult life. The employee who can walk into their manager's office and say, I understand your direction, but I think there's a better approach, and here's why. That employee is more valuable than the one who nods and complies. The patient who can say to their doctor, I've read about this treatment, and I have some concerns. That patient's probably going to get better care. Or the partner who can say, I love you, but I see this differently, and here's my reasoning. That partner builds a stronger relationship than the one who swallows their disagreement until it turns into resentment. And where does that skill get developed? It doesn't get developed in a classroom. For the most part, schools train the same compliance model that homes do. Sit down, be quiet, follow instructions, raise your hand, give the right answer. There is almost no institutional space in a child's life where they are explicitly taught to disagree with an authority figure and rewarded for doing it well, which means the only place it can really happen consistently is at home, at the dinner table, in the car, when you're arguing about bedtime. And we have to let that as parents, which means the only place it can happen is at home, at the dinner table, in the car, in an argument about bedtime, if we let it. Exhibit C, a parent's ego. I want to be honest about something here. And this is the part of the episode I'm least comfortable recording, but I think it's the part that matters the most. The reason most parents shut down disagreement is not about the child, it's about the parent. When one of my kids disagrees with me, something happens in my chest. It tightens. I feel a heat. My body reads it the same way it reads any challenge, as a threat. And the threat isn't to my child's well-being or to the household structure. The threat is to my authority, to my identity as the person in charge, to the story that I've built around what it means to be a good parent, which for me, and I suspect for a lot of people, was modeled on control. Because I said so is not a parenting philosophy. It's a defense mechanism. It's what comes out when you don't have a better answer or when you're too tired to explain, and when the honest response would be, I haven't thought about this as carefully as you're forcing me to right now, and that makes me uncomfortable. I was raised by incredible parents who loved me deeply and who used because I said so very regularly. And I don't blame them. That was the model. That was the generation. But I can see now, at 47, with 3 kids of my own, that the model wasn't designed to develop my ability to think. It was designed to maintain order. And order and development are not always the same thing. The hardest part of teaching your kids to disagree with you is that it requires you to tolerate being wrong, or at least to be questioned. And for most of us, being questioned by our kids triggers something primal, something that says, I'm losing ground. And the instinct is to reclaim it, to pull rank, to end the conversation with authority rather than reasoning. But every time I've done that, I've won the moment and I've lost the lesson. My child learned that disagreeing with someone in power is futile, and I reinforced the one parenting habit I'm most trying to break. Exhibit D, how to build the muscle. All right, so if compliance is the trap and disagreement is the skill, how do we actually teach it? Because I'm not advocating for chaos. I'm not saying that you should let your kids run the house. There is a framework here, and it starts with one fundamental distinction: the difference between the what and the why. There are decisions where the what is non-negotiable: safety, health, core family values. Your 7-year-old doesn't get a vote on whether they wear a seatbelt. But the why should always be available. Why do we wear seatbelts? You explain to them, because this is what happens when you don't. The child may not get to change the decision, but they should have an opportunity to understand it, and they should always be allowed to ask. Then there are decisions where the what is flexible: bedtime on the weekends, how they spend their allowance, what they wear to school, what route they take on a project. Those are the disagreement opportunities. This is the gym, and the goal here is not for the parents to win, it's to coach. Here's what I've started doing with my kids, and I'm going to share it not because I'm perfect, but because it's started to change the way that I think about engaging with them on these sorts of issues. First, when one of my kids disagrees with a decision, I've stopped saying because I said so, and I've started saying, make your case. 3 words, make your case. It signals that their perspective is welcome, but it also raises the bar. You don't just get to whine. You can't just say this isn't fair. Organize your thoughts and present them. And the minute you ask a child to do that, the tantrum turns into thinking. Not every time, but more often than you'd expect. Second, I've started narrating my own reasoning. Instead of just issuing a decision, I explain to them how I've gotten there. We're not going to do that today, and here's why. You have a test tomorrow. You haven't started studying. You have homework. You have reading. And the last time we did this, you were exhausted the next day. That's my reasoning. And if you think I'm wrong about something, then tell me. This does 2 things. It models the skill I'm trying to teach, and it gives them something to actually respond to rather than a brick wall. Third, when they make a good argument, I change my mind. This is the hardest one, because changing your mind in front of your child feels like you're losing authority. But it's actually the most powerful thing you can do. It teaches them that reasoning works, that authority figures can be persuaded by evidence, that the world is not a fixed hierarchy where the person in charge is always right. And it also teaches them that their voice matters, and there is no parenting lesson more important than that. And fourth, when they make a bad argument, I don't just overrule them. I explain to them why it didn't land. I might say something along the lines of, you're assuming this, but the reality is that. You're not accounting for this factor. You're making this about how you feel rather than why it makes sense. I'm coaching their thinking and not just their behavior. And over time, their arguments will get better, and their reasoning will get sharper. The conversations we have will get richer. And our relationship, and this is the part I didn't expect, gets stronger. Because my kids know that their voice is heard when they're with me, not just tolerated, but heard. Now, let's take on a couple of objections to today's case. First, Matt, kids need structure. They need boundaries. If you invite them to argue with every decision, you're going to have anarchy. You're going to raise kids who think they're entitled to challenge everything and respect nothing. Kids absolutely need structure. They need boundaries. They need to know that some things are not up for debate. And I said that explicitly. Safety decisions, health decisions, core values, those are non-negotiable. But structure and silence are not the same thing. A child can live inside of a clear, consistent structure and still be invited to ask why. The structure doesn't weaken because a child understands the reasoning behind it. It actually gets stronger. Because a child who understands why a boundary exists is far more likely to respect it than a child who is simply told to obey it. Compliance without understanding is obedience. Compliance with understanding is buy-in. And buy-in lasts a lot longer than obedience. Objection number 2. Matt, what you're talking about here is generational softness. Prior generations did not need to explain themselves to their kids, and they turned out fine. I think you're overcomplicating parenting. My response is to ask you, did they turn out fine? And I don't mean that as a punchline. I mean it as a genuine question. How many adults do you know who struggle to advocate for themselves, who stay in jobs they hate because they don't know how to push back, who stay silent in relationships because disagreeing feels dangerous, or who vote the way they're told because they never built the muscle to think independently? I'm not blaming all of that on parenting, but I am saying that the model we inherited, the model of compliance first, questions never, has consequences that show up decades later. And the fact that a generation survived doesn't mean it was optimal. We survived a lot of things that we've since learned to do better. I love my parents. They did an extraordinary job with what they had and what they knew. And I'm choosing to evolve the model. Not because they failed, but because I know more now, and I think that's what every generation owes to the next one. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, here's what I believe. The world my kids are walking into is not a world that rewards obedience. It's a world that rewards the ability to think clearly, communicate effectively, and to stand behind a position when it matters. It's a world where they will sit across from bosses and partners, doctors, systems, and institutions that will always have more power than they do. And in those moments, the thing that will determine the quality of their life is not whether they can follow instructions. It's whether they can make their case. I want my kids to be able to walk into a room, disagree with the most powerful person in that room, and walk out with that person's respect. I want them to be able to say, I see this differently, without their hands shaking and their voice cracking and their heart telling them they're about to get in trouble. I want disagreement to feel normal to them. Not aggressive, not scary, just normal. And the only way that happens is if they practice at home, with me, and with their mom, in the safety of a relationship where the stakes are low and the love is unconditional. If they can't disagree with me, the person in the world who loves them the most, they will never be able to disagree with people who don't. So, I'm done saying because I said so. Not because it's wrong in every situation, but because I was using it as a default instead of an exception. And every time I said it, I was choosing my comfort over their development. Make your case. That's what I say now. And I mean it. Because the kid who can make their case at the dinner table is the adult who can make their case in a boardroom, in a voting booth, or in a doctor's office, or in a relationship where something isn't right and staying silent isn't an option. That's the skill. And for me, it starts at home. And it starts with us as parents being brave enough to let our kids practice on us. So, if I've made my case effectively, and you want to start doing things in your own life to move these ideas out of this courtroom and into the real world, here's a couple micro tools. First, replace because I said so with make your case or some version of it. The next time your kid pushes back on a decision, any decision, don't shut it down, invite it. Say, okay, help me understand why you think I'm wrong. And then actually listen. You don't have to change your mind, but let them make the argument. The opportunity to make that argument matters much more than the outcome. Second, narrate your own reasoning out loud. The next time you make a decision that affects your kids, explain how you got there. Walk them through your logic, show your work, not because you owe them a justification, because you're modeling the skill you want them to develop. If you want them to reason, let them see what reasoning looks like. Third, change your mind once, just once this week. When one of your kids makes a good argument, say, you know what, you're right. I didn't think of it that way. Let's do it your way. Then watch what happens to their face. Watch what happens to your relationship. And notice what it costs you. It costs you nothing except the illusion that parents always have to win. So that's the case for today. If you recognized any of this in your own household, I'd love to hear about it. Post your thoughts on social media with hashtag #TheCase4 and tell me, when was the last time one of your kids disagreed with you? And did you let them make your case? Because the kid who can disagree with you at the dinner table is an adult who can disagree with the world. So let them practice. Thanks for listening, and remember, whatever your case is, don't be afraid to build it and carry it out into the real world.